This is Dateline News and Conversation. Well, we're just 3 days into 2024. I'm not going to wish any of you a Happy New Year. I'm reluctant to do so. I have the feeling that as I look ahead in the upcoming months, a lot of people are going to wish it was still 2023. On the show tonight, we're going to connect some dots. We're going to unveil some myths and lies. We're going to talk about one of the largest perpetrators of lies there is, and that's the media and who controls the media. We're going to take a look back at the entirety of American history from the arrival of the white European colonialists that thought they discovered a new land. We're going to look at some of the threats to our humanity, our basic humanity. And then we'll take a look at the two things that seem to be at the top of the news: the war in Israel and Gaza and Lebanon. It looks like it's about to spread. And of course, the war in Ukraine. We'll try to end on a positive note, and we'll discuss the BRICS Plus. My guest tonight, he's a favorite. He's back. Dean Henderson, welcome to the show.
Hey Regis, glad to be with you.
Well, it's always great to be with you, Dean. Um, it always guarantees a lot of really solid research and information. And I think it serves to challenge a lot of people's thinking. We've done a number of shows on who really is in control: the Crown, the Rothschilds, the ancient bloodlines, the secret societies, the Freemasons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Tonight, I want to do kind of a free flowing discussion with you on a number of things that are not accidents, but according to their agenda. Let's take a look, first of all, at the media, journalism, which is the messenger, the megaphone of the rich and powerful. John Pilger, one of the greatest journalists of all times, a rock star, a giant, and a friend who had a great deal to do with influencing me in what I'm doing. Dean, I want to start off with something that not a lot of people may know about: how the mainstream media in Hollywood was taken over by the CIA in what is known as Operation Mockingbird. What are your thoughts on all of that? I know you know that it's not accidental what's happened, but I'd like you to share your thoughts on how this whole thing operates and how it's controlled.
Well, I think what I've learned over time is that this is a long relationship between the media and the intelligence services of the crown. And it all started really, of course, in the city of London with the Empire Press Union, they called it. And it was founded by a group called the Pilgrim Society, which another one of these secret societies that was a spinoff of the Business Roundtable, the Rothschilds, and they started this Empire Press Union, and they were putting out the news. Like, what is the news? How do you who decides what the news is, right? And as it turns out, from a very early point in our history, the intelligence agencies decide what the news is, and it's still the case today. So, the Empire Press Union, um, was really the first print media propaganda. And out of the Empire Press Union were recruited all of your MI5, MI6, and CIA people, and which these entities were all founded at the same time in the late 40s. And that's also no coincidence, because even the formation of the CIA was decided at a meeting of the MI6 in the city of London at the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House. And so they recruited all of their agents from this Empire Press Union, because their job was already at propaganda. And what do intelligence agencies mostly do? Propaganda, deception. I mean, the nature of the business is deception. And over time, it's become more about deceiving your domestic audience than it has about deceiving your alleged enemies. You know, for example, nowadays Iran, China, Russia. So, you know, there's that goes on too. They attempt to throw propaganda in those countries' directions, but it hasn't really been that successful. So they figured out that it's much more efficient to throw the propaganda at your domestic audience, your citizens. And so then, you know, Edward Bernays came along, and, you know, there was this deep dive into, you know, ways to influence people. And this all really emanated again from the Tavistock Institute, which is another part of the Crown, also in the city of London. Has to do with, you know, social engineering is their mission. And so over the years, they've been responsible for hatching a lot of these plans that, you know, just basically lying to people, whether it's false flag activity or whether it's a certain Hollywood movie. If you pay attention to a little bit to the mainstream media, which I do just a little bit, just to see, you know, see what they're up to. There's a couple movies coming out. There's one, it's called Civil War. And, you know, you can see what's coming in this country. You can see what's coming in America, and that there actually have been planning like a civil war for quite some time. And it's gotten to the point where, you know, your Trumpers and your Bideners, you know, they hate each other. They're at each other's throats. They think their guy's the white knight and the other guy's the devil. And my mind, they're both devils. But they've got these people at each other's throats. So there's a movie called Civil War. Well, there's another one that's coming out. It's called Aquaman. It's like the third in a sequel of these things. And I don't remember the name of this actor. He's a pretty boy, long hair, big guy, probably a Nephilim hybrid, because a lot of these guys, like The Rock, and a lot of these guys are actually, you know, Nephilim hybrids that they march out, and I guess they want the women to watch, you know, whatever. But the whole trailer of this movie is about how these kind of lizards come down to Earth and help Aquaman, who's also a weird creature, you know, and they're the good guys, you know. So what are they doing there? Well, they're telegraphing the coming out party that's going on right now with these Anunnaki, and they're coming out of the closet, and they're just, here we are, here's who we are, what are you gonna do about it? But anyway, so anyway, you had the Empire Press Union, you had Edward Bernays, then you had the advent of television, and television was a huge, you know, invention for these people, because, you know, there's studies that show that television just rewires your entire brain, and you enter this sort of mode where you're no longer an actor in your life. You're not the actor anymore. Nothing really happens in your life. Everything happens on the screen. Everything happens in some famous person's life, some movie, some documentary, some, you know, most of these documentaries are also propaganda. They're just under the guise of a documentary, so they have a veneer of legitimacy to them, because they know some people have wised up. So then they got to do that, and so all of a sudden you're not really in charge of your own life anymore. You don't have sovereignty over your own mind, really. And they're taking you and they're separating you from this other reality, which is not reality. It's virtual reality. It's fake. Everything on TV is fake, except maybe sports. Which is why actually the only thing I watch on TV is sports, because at least it's real. At least the players are trying their best, and this kind of thing. Maybe there's a crooked ref, or obviously the owners are loaded billionaires and it's all money. I know that, but at least when you watch, excuse me, when you watch a football game, you're watching people actually doing what they're actually doing, and they're not acting. They're not trying to, be something they're not. And there's no, drama music in the background, to try to put you in a trance, which they've gotten really good at that. The music's really important and all these things. And Gerrymander, a guy named Gerrymander wrote a book one time back when people had sense, back in the 70s, 80s. It's called 7 Arguments Against Television. And he wasn't arguing that, if we had good shows on TV would be fine. He was arguing that no, TV is just bad. And he goes through the different reasons, and one of which he's talking about just rewiring your brain to where you no longer have agency. You're no longer, it's not your life, and your life is nothing. It's all about their life, those people on TV, and they're so important, and the things they're talking about are so important, and you shouldn't stop and just think about what you want to think about, anymore, because that's not news, or that's not pertinent anymore in your life. This is what's pertinent, and we're telling you what it is. And so it's just, that was the really beginning of this real disconnection, I think, that people had with reality, was television, and it still is, honestly. And so they got into this, and in the 50s, they got into the MK Ultra stuff, and they got into cybernetics. And one of the operations was called Operation Monarch. And Operation Monarch was where they literally had people, openly worshiping the devil and Lucifer, and they just kept repeating these dark messages to people, this demonic messages, and people would adopt them, and people would become lone gunmen for them. And this is the origins of MK Ultra. They would do anything they were told to do. They were disassociated again from themselves, which was already being accomplished by television by that time, because television came around the 40s, right before the intelligence agencies were founded, which is, I don't think, a coincidence. And so then they proceeded with this MK Ultra program, and they never stopped. They used LSD, they used different drugs, they did all kinds of things, but this program never stopped. And Operation Mockingbird was basically the same. It's the same CIA that comes up with this, and it's just an covert way to pay off journalists. That was exposed in the Church Committee hearings in 1976, and Frank Church, senator from Idaho, not too long after that, was assassinated, died of poisoning. Bill Colby died in a canoe accident. Not, a little while later, he was the CIA director who, actually came forward and testified and told some truths, which you're not supposed to do, because your job is to lie. And if you tell the truth, they kill you. That's what you're sworn to. That's what you're sworn to under all these secret societies, media corporations, intelligence agency, all of which really are the same thing. Whether it's the Pilgrim Society, the Freemasons, NBC News, the CIA. I mean, it's all the same brotherhood, the same, you could call them knights. They're knights. They're knights in the pecking order. These are all knights. These are all operatives. Bill Gates is a knight of the British Empire now. He's an operative. He's a knight. But they're all just underlings subservient to the crown, and the crown decides, okay, you told the truth, you die. You're expendable. They're all expendable. All these people are expendable. But now what they've done with the MK Ultra, I think, is they've taken it to a point where they don't just focus on individual; they focus on entire populations of people, and they figured out the technology, and it's called the internet. Because now with the internet, the ARPANET, which again came from DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Administration, creepiest part of the Pentagon. They've now it's interactive. So now you not only sit and watch the people act and look at these lies and this fake reality and this fake news and these things you're supposed to consider important that because they're on TV, but now they're on the internet, and now you can actually participate in the deception of yourself. You can reinforce your own self deception on this thing called the internet. And then with the advent of social media, on top of that, you can you can create a consensus where now you're able to get a whole bunch of people at one time confirming lies as truth and saying this is the way it really is when it's not. But the majority will say that because the algorithms are so sophisticated and the news feeds towards each individual are targeted, and and the people who have the lowest IQs are the ones that comment the most on Facebook, and because they're all about self-aggrandizement and insecurity, and I never got love from mommy, so I need likes on Facebook. So and they know that the weakest people are the ones that kind of hijack, the chat rooms or Facebook or Instagram or any of these things. And so then they create this kind of herd mentality behind them, this hive mind that now is able to reinforce the lie. And that serves an MK Ultra purpose to where the CIA is now able to cast this broad net and basically mind control not just an individual lone gunman anymore, but an entire society. And of course, the people that go up against those low IQ people on Facebook are marginalized, and run off and banned, or the mob just attacks them, like every single one of the mob. So that's where it's now interactive. It's now a point where again we're actually participating and we're actually enabling and we're helping along our own intellectual demise, our own. Um, it's dangerous, and we don't know these people don't know how dangerous this is to themselves, and they just think it's great because they get to send pictures to everybody, and everybody has pictures now. If you notice, everybody wants you to look at their pictures, and everybody's become really needy. Like they don't have any fortitude anymore. They're all just they want attention, and this is part of the programming of MK Ultra, is to teach people that this is how you should need a lot of attention in your life. You should be high maintenance now. You should kind of be a pain in the ass to everybody, and that helps as an agency. That helps the society to break down, and it helps to keep the focus off of foreign policy, genocides, like we're seeing today. So yeah, I mean, I think today it's no different. Anderson Cooper is a Vanderbilt, for example. Um, the elite families, they are recruited for the media, and they have a vested interest in not changing things, not seeing things change. I've never met a rich person born into wealth who was a revolutionary, and I don't think I ever will, because in the end they fall back on their status, and they want to protect their money and their assets, so they don't really want change. So I think nothing's changed, but that's a little bit of history anyway, as I understand it.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you expanded this conversation because I started it out talking about the media, about John Pilger, who has been a crusader against modern journalism and the media, probably more outspoken than anybody.
Mhm.
But you expanded it into the work of the intelligence agencies who actually write the news. They write the scripts for these movies coming out of Hollywood. And I saw the trailer uh, for the Civil War. And I mean, some of us have been talking about it. Looks like there's already a civil war in the United States without all out shooting.
Yep.
But I think it's coming. There was another one that I just watched uh, is The World Beyond. Oh my
Mhm.
goodness. Just kind of a people think it's a sci-fi movie. It's just artificial. It's it's not real, but they're telegraphing these things to us.
Mhm.
You mentioned deception. It's all been about deception and lies.
Mhm.
Um, Talking about lies and deception, I want your reaction to this, but it's become my belief. My undergraduate degree was in United States history. In my later years, I became a real student of history, reading Howard Zinn, watching Oliver Stone's The Untold History of the United States, a lot of other independent sources. I've come to believe that the entire history of the United States is not a myth, but a lie that's been reinforced not only through our social and civic events, our holidays, but in our churches, in our schools, the way history is taught, that we've been led to believe that we're that city on the hill. It's our God given mission to be an example and spread freedom and democracy throughout the world. This has been, I wanted to say drummed into us, but it's been just kind of soaked into us through our entire lives from a very young age. And I think this is one of the greatest, most destructive lies that's ever been created about the United States of America. But as you were saying, it becomes so hardwired in us through everything in our culture, in our society that we've been surrounded with, that people cannot accept the truth and the facts about what the United States has done. And Dean, I just want to say, in our lifetimes, I was born in 1945. The country's been at war every single year since, and reportedly has killed over 20 million innocent people and is continuing to do it today. And yet, people in America still think it's about spreading freedom and democracy. And any of us that speak out against any of that, against the government, against foreign policy, against domestic issues, against the media, against journalists, as you said, we're alienated, ostracized, sometimes locked up in prison, like Julian Assange and others. And then those of us who have been marginalized and banned and blocked and deleted on social media. I wonder what your thoughts are on this history of the United States, which I now characterize as just an all out deception and lie.
Yeah, absolutely, Regis. Absolutely right about that. And not only that, but I would say the history of the world as well. I mean, the history of the world is all a lie. And, we're led to believe, for example, that the Indians were savages, right? Let's start with that. I mean, I've never met more savage people in my life than the British aristocracy, and I've met them. And these people are unclean. When the Persians went to London in the 13th century, they were appalled. They had to bring them the medicine. Persians brought medicine to the West because they didn't even know. I mean, they were feeding people mercury and stuff, to heal them. And I mean, there was rats everywhere, and these aristocrats. These are the ones that hunt with dogs, and they hunt down animals just to kill them. And this is what Prince Charles does, like on weekends. Okay, and everything they do. I mean, they put up bird houses so birds come in so they can watch the birds, and they feed them sugar So they'll just die. They don't care. It's all about their entertainment. It's all about, they just need to be entertained because they think they're better than everyone else. They think they're better than every human. They think they're better than every creature, every plant, every rock. They think they're special. And this is where the Israelis get this, we're the special people. It comes from the British. It comes from the British crown because they're the ones who really think they're special. And they're entitled to a life of leisure, and others are supposed to work for them and buy them things even. And and if they don't get their way, they throw a fit. They're savages. They taught the Indians how to scalp. The Indians didn't scalp as a matter of what they did. They just did it because they were scalped, because their scalps were taken back by Daniel Boone, the great Daniel Boone. There's a big historical lie for you. We teach every kid in school that Daniel Boone was this rugged, great explorer. This guy couldn't find his way through the woods anywhere, but this guy was a mercenary for the crown. He just took Indian scalps back to the crown because they wanted a head count on how many they'd killed so they could go steal their land because they're savages. That's what savages do. They steal land. They don't buy land. They don't negotiate. They don't sit down and talk. They didn't bring the Indians Thanksgiving. The Indians brought them Thanksgiving, and then they murdered the Indians. I mean, these are savages. These things are savages. And then to turn it around and say the Indians were savages. But this is how they do. Everything they do, all the heinous crimes they've committed over 8,500 years of history, they then turn that around and project that onto others and say, oh, it's that person that did it, or it's that group that did it. We didn't do it. We're perfect. We go to church every Sunday. We read our Bible. We sing at church, or we go to the Freemason Lodge and take our pledge. And if you look at it in the end, religion, Freemasonry, again, we're supposed to believe they're at odds with each other. And, the Christians think, the Freemasons are devil worshipers, and the Freemasons think the Christians are dumb because they believe in this creator, and they're all the same. They're all the same. It's all the same British crown aristocracy that backed every part of it. And so organized religion, they use that for a long time to just bludgeon people, make them feel bad about themselves. The missionaries would go all over the world, trying to cure the native savages who were just destined to go to hell. If they didn't hear from, they could be saved by Jesus. And these people that went over there doing that, these missionaries, I mean, if Jesus showed up today, they'd spit on him. They'd ostracize him just like they do us. They'd make him sit in the back of the bus. They'd probably let him hang from a cross and laugh about it. I mean, so they go soften up the third world countries, these missionaries, for the CIA, for the oil companies, for the banana companies. That's what they've always done. They still are doing it. And then they sit there and tell us how pious they are and how holy they are. And that's why the British have to wear these suits. This is where the three-piece suit came from. It hides the savage. They needed to hide the savage. So, and they have to sip tea with the pinky out, and they have to do all these things like that. And it's all about concealment of savagery. But these are the savages, right? So that the whole, not just American history, but the entire history of this planet is a lie. And the only decent people left are the indigenous people, the ones that have made it, the ones that haven't been turned into drunks or drug addicts by the CIA trafficking networks, or the ones who haven't been trafficked as women by the oil company pipeline people, as is happening in South Dakota. And the cops will do nothing about it. And they just say, oh, it's the Indians have a lot of problems. They drink too much. Oh, yeah, it's okay if somebody, gets drunk and you rape them, I guess. That's the person's fault that drank, but they just still have this mindset that they're better than everybody. And a lot of white folks do. A lot of white folks just think they're better than black folks. I mean, it's a real problem. Racism is real. It's not, I know there's the phony Black Lives Matter, and I know there's the phony let's start a race war in Obama's movie, and I know all that. But there's also racism, a lot of it, and it's almost like the darker your skin is, the worse it is for you. I've been to Central America. You go to the northern part of Mexico where it's mestizo, where it's a mix of white, Spaniard, and Indian. Those people, they're treated, they're kind of like the the worker class, whatever. They even get a little money. You go down further into the Mayan territory, oh, then people are treated terrible. The Indians are treated terrible. Then you go over to the Garifuna areas of the coast, the black escaped slaves in Honduras and Costa Rica and all down that coast, Belize, and those people are just dirt. And it's the same if you go to Japan. It's that same pecking order. And the Japanese try to be white. The women put white powder on their face to try to be more white. And what is it? But I tell you what it is. It's the Anunnaki cult. And we're worshiping a sky god that doesn't exist. It's an evil, nefarious entity. And this whole thing about white light, and everything white is good, right? And everything black is bad. I mean, have you noticed that? I mean, it's just, there's so much of this crown trash in people's heads, and especially white people, that they got to get it out, man. And you got to be a human being again. And you can't see yourself as better than anyone else. And, it's just, you'll be happier. Okay. You'll have a soul again. You'll be a human being again if you do that. But it's just the lies from history that made people this way, Regis. And it's just, then some people were put in the service of these people as colonial settlers, as the ones that went in and killed the Indians and took their land. Then they got rewarded with the land, just like they're doing in Israel now. So yeah, it's all lies. It's so deep, man.
Dean, you talk about genocide of the indigenous people around the world. You can talk about slavery and what we've done to black people, African people in this country. Uh, you can talk about what's going on in Gaza right now, which is another genocide, a depopulation, purification, supposedly, of those people who are less than human. I mean, but, you know, as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about the threats that the crown, these racists, these royal bloodlines, these whatever you want to call them, are threatening us today. And you mentioned our humanity. You've got to fight to be humans, to stay human. They're coming after us now with a variety of threats that we've been made to believe these things could be good. Let me mention two or three: technology, technocracy, digital currencies, digital recognition systems. They're talking, and you mentioned the internet, mind control, and addiction, all kinds of addictions, including drugs, alcohol, television, entertainment. I want your thoughts on how dangerous these threats are, and then I'm going to want your thoughts on what digital currencies and digital recognition systems are going to mean for us. And that's in light of what the Chinese have already developed is the Chinese social credit system,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
where they have given up, I believe, their sovereignty and their independence to a government. I don't care that it's communist. I don't want to give up my independence and my sovereignty, have them put a chip in me, have them know everything about me, and can punish me or reward me at will. This, I think, is one of the most damaging threats to who we are as free and human people.
absolutely. Yeah. What can you say? I mean, once you are given a digital ID, I mean, your your sovereignty is done. I mean, your freedom is over. It's finished. I mean, they can deny receipt of payment based on your they don't like you. You're an activist. They don't like you. You do things they don't like. All they got to do is deny payment um, to you. They can deny you the ability to buy things at a grocery store if they don't like you. I mean,
They,
if you're
they,
a
they can already shut down, block, or steal your money from your bank account. They're already doing it to journalists. Some of my
yeah,
friends, probably some of yours. Maybe even it happened to you.
yeah, Yeah, I mean, my bank account got froze. They didn't steal it, but they wanted to. But Wells Fargo, what 10 years ago, was caught doing that exact same thing, where they just and I know one person who still hasn't got his money back, and I bet you there's a lot of those people. So yeah, I mean, it's just the power of the money power, and that's all that's going to do is reinforce the power of the central banks, which, as we know, are private, making them the commercial banks, the Goldman Sachs, the Wells Fargo. I write on Substack, and people do pledges. They can pledge if they like my writing. They can support me financially. That's fine. So I finally signed up to do the Stripe thing. It's called Stripe, and Stripe is a payment mechanism where they can pledge in any country, and somehow it gets to your bank account, $8 a month or whatever it is. Well, I was looking at the terms and conditions, and the owner of Stripe on the cool Substack, it's so cool, right? Is Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs. So Morgan Stanley owns Spotify, the music thing. I mean, all these cute little things that they're coming up with, these cute little, and it's all leading to enslavement. I mean, the only reason I didn't turn that button on for a long time. I was just leaving money on the table because I was like, they wanted a facial recognition, and I refused to do it. Well, I finally figured out a way around it, so I turned it on. But I'm telling you, all of these things, I got rid of PayPal years ago for this exact reason, because all this leads to digital enslavement, and the more of a digital footprint you have, the worse off you are, because the more trackable you are, the more they know about you, because machine learning is always ongoing, and you would be shocked at what they know about everybody. I'm sure most people would be shocked to know what they know about everybody. I mean, everything. They know everything about you because of your digital footprint. So that's the other thing the internet has enabled. But it's also leading to, a system again where once you can't spend cash, once you have to use a digital payment system, the control is overwhelming. The totalitarian state has been accomplished. There is no more freedom, because freedom right now, a lot of it has to do with money, under the table, cash, doing what you want, spending it where you want. You buy gas here, you're taking a trip. Don't use your debit card or they'll know where you're going. Don't use it but you have to use it for hotels now. More and more, you have to use those kind of things. So really, that's one of the things people can do. People, well, it's doom and gloom. What can we do? Well, one thing you can do is don't use your debit card much. Use cash. Use cash for as much as you can. I use it for everything. I mean, I really do. I rarely use my debit card. I don't even have a credit card. I don't want a credit card. I don't have a credit score. I don't have a positive one. I don't have a negative one. I just don't have one because I don't have a credit card. And the credit card companies don't like me because I used to take them to town on airline miles and just exploit the hell out of them and then cut the card out. So that's the way I treat credit card companies. But I don't need credit. I don't want credit. I have cash, and I'm going to keep enough cash that I don't ever need credit. But that's the key, is to get ahead of the system so you don't have to fall into this digital trap. If you just don't save money and you just keep slogging along with nothing, there's going to come a day when, there's going to be, oh, here, Johnny, we'll give you a free, $1,500 a month to do nothing. But it's not going to be free. This universal basic income, which is going to be part of this, it's not going to be free. There's going to be strings attached. And one of these big strings, the biggest string, is that you have to do everything online, and you have to have a full roster of everything you spend, everything you buy, everything you get paid, and all that. So it's all leading down the road to tyranny. And again, everyone should try to use cash. Is all I can say. And yeah, the day that happens, I don't know. It's gonna be bad.
Well, I don't think it's too far off. And
No.
when you talk about the control, you got Klaus Schwab, in his book and in his pronouncements in the World Economic Forum, uh, you you will own nothing and you will be happy and you can eat bugs. I mean, it's right out there. People don't believe it. I don't know what they think if they even hear somebody like him talk, that it's about depopulation, it's
Mm-hmm.
about dehumanizing us, depersonalizing
Mm-hmm.
us.
Yep.
It's a destruction of, I think, the human race. I think that's the gold.
Yeah.
I really think it is. And you tie it in so well, uh, not with a theory, but the facts about the Anunnaki. They no longer have a need for us. We've talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
And people can laugh at us. They can call us nut jobs, conspiracy theorists. But when you look at what is happening today, what is happening has not come from our basic humanity.
Mm-hmm.
It has come from an evil place, an
Yeah.
evil place. And that's terrifying. Um,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know, I want to ask you this. You're living in the United States, and I haven't been there now for 4 years. When I look at everything that is happening in the world, and we both agree that the United States is the battering ram of the crown.
Right.
It's this colossal military never seen before that is the weapon of the crown all over the world. Um, when you look at what's happening to the economy in the United States, 34 trillion and climbing fast. People are in debt. They'll never get out from under the debt.
Mm-hmm.
Students will never be able to pay it off. When you look at what United States is doing, and they're doing it all over the world, but the sanctions that they placed on Russia have backfired. There's no denying that. You look what it's done to Europe. Look what it's done to Germany. And then they blew up the pipeline. And the United States now trying to attract German industry to the United States where they can get cheap gas. Germany now has slipped to the fifth largest economy in the world.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the rest of Europe, they're beginning to freeze. They're beginning to steal, shoplift for food, for supplies. Inflation is sky high. They can't even afford it anymore. And then when I look at what's happening in the United States, there, there is social discord, political discord. The United States, if it ever had a moral compass, lost it. There's no sense of spirituality. They've turned people against each other over every conceivable issue you can imagine. And you have this election that's coming up, Dean, according to you, between two evil people. Um, the people are going to go vote again for the lesser of two evils. That's what they'll say, but it's still evil. Dean, do you see an economic and societal collapse coming in the United States, somewhat like what happened in the Soviet Union?
Oh yeah, I mean it's so obvious that it's coming, and it's going to happen fast, and it's going to be a hard fall. It's going to be a big thud. They're just trying to string it along. Ponzi scheme economy, which is just loaded with financial bubbles. I mean, stocks are a bubble, bonds are a bubble, real estate's a bubble, gold's a bubble, everything's a bubble, food's a bubble, housing's a bubble because BlackRock, just went out and bought like a fifth of the housing stock in the United States, to rent them out. Building new homes now, they are to rent out. So this is why rents are high. This is why housing prices to buy a house is high, higher than ever, just totally unjustified. But my only question is, how long can they string it out? And because now the Fed and the central banks, I mean, they're completely in control, right? And we know who controls them. And so, do the laws of economic supply anymore? Does it matter that this is a giant Ponzi scheme? Do we have a rule of law that will prevent Goldman Sachs from just taking money out of your bank account anymore? Um, do interest rates really raising interest rates, does that really push down inflation anymore? Or are we in a spot now where the cartel is totally in control of every facet of the economy. And so they're just going to string it out, string it out. They can ask whatever they want for potatoes at the store because there's like 3 companies growing the potatoes, and there's like 3 grocery stores selling them, and there's like 3 wholesale distributors, and on and on and on. Same with healthcare, 3 hospital chains, 3 insurance companies. Look at every sector. Look at the defense sector. Look at the ag processing sector. Look at the mining sector. Look at the oil and gas sector. There's 3 or 4 companies that control the entire thing. So why does the price of oil go up? Is it really because of Middle East tension or broken refineries? No, it's because a tanker full of crude oil leaves Rotterdam at $40 a barrel. By the time it gets to New York, another 30's been added on by the speculators, Morgan Stanley, and who then stores it in its oil storage facilities on the East Coast and sits on it until it goes up another $10. And that's literally everything has been thrown into speculation. You're even seeing it with sports. Look at football games. This last year, all they talk about is Draft Kings. Oh, Draft Kings, huh? With a crown on it. I see. I wonder who owns that? Can't imagine. But everything's about betting now. Everything's about the over under, and everything's about betting. And they bet on everything. Like, this guy's going to have so many yards, and if he doesn't, you win, and if he does, you don't. It's not about even watching the game or enjoying the game anymore. It's about betting. And every single thing, if you think about it, has been thrown into speculation. And gee, where did I read that? Oh, I read that in the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which I first wrote about in my big oil book, my first book. And I've got several long extended quotes from that document, which they say is a fraud. But it's funny how that fraudulent document seems to be just coming true day by day, And it was written by the Priory of Zion, which is one of along with the Rosicrucians, one of the top. We talked about the hierarchy, the other day, the bloodline hierarchy, and it's the bloodline, Council of 33, Committee of 300, and then Priory of Zion and Rosicrucians. That's the hierarchy. And the Priory of Zion wrote that. He talked about how the Rothschilds were going to throw everything into speculation, and how money was energy, and how they were just going to, just throw it all into a free-for-all. And there's no regulation. Look at the internet. There's no regulation on the internet. There's no you could sell poison to somebody on Amazon, and there's nothing that person could do. They just die. There's no recourse. Sorry, we don't even know who that seller was. I have no idea, says Amazon. It's all just the Wild West. It's all stacked in favor of the cartel. It's all stacked in favor of big business. There's no negotiating from the people. There's no possibility of an alternative anymore. So that's my only question. How long can they string this out? My answer to that at this point would be this answer. They can string that out for as long as they are not militarily defeated by another nation, by a benevolent force, because that, to me, that may be the only thing that could stop it. Otherwise, I think maybe they can string this thing out for a very long time, and there will not be a collapse. But if the BRICS get it together, which let's get into that, then
That's where I was. That's exactly where I was going.
There you go.
The only paradigm shift that I can see that is in direct opposition to this is the BRICS Plus. Now, I think Russia is going to be the chair for this next year. It was just announced, I don't know if you read it in American papers or not, that I think 7 more countries have been added: Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Ethiopia, maybe. I forget the others. But then there's another 14 or more that want to enter this year.
Right.
Now, do you see, and by the way, another part of the BRICS is the de-dollarization and trading in their own currency, or they'll make up another currency and their own World Bank, their own International Monetary Fund for development. How do you see that playing out? And is that the thing that can bring it down? The crown.
Yeah, that is the thing that could bring it down, and that is economic warfare, and that would be a military defeat to me if the BRICS were able to pull this off. And I'm all for it, because again, it's going to take a military defeat, and that's, I mean, you can say it's not military, it's economic, but let's don't kid ourselves, man. That's huge. That's a military blow to the West if that happens, and that's fine. That's what should happen. I mean, I
Wait a
hope it
minute.
happens.
Wait a minute. You confuse me. Is it an economic defeat or a military defeat or both?
Both. I think it's both. But what I'm saying is the economic impact of that is a military strategy. I mean, I think because it delivers just a crushing blow to the West. I mean, that's more powerful than taking down aircraft carriers. You know, that's more powerful than wiping out our Air Force because that wipes out our currency. That not just our currency, but it takes down the entire global financial system that was set up at Bretton Woods. And that is the source of all evil. You know, we got to get rid of this SWIFT system. Like, who runs the SWIFT system? How does that work? Can anybody tell me that? Because it's all these little bitty things that just happen that we don't question. But like, how come you can't wire money into Russia in US dollars, for example, right now? Well, you know why? It's the SWIFT system. Well, who owns the SWIFT system? Well, the commercial banks own the SWIFT system. Visa, MasterCard. Who owns Visa, MasterCard? Oh, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America. That's who. So again, it's the Federal Reserve cartel. And that's who it is. That's who controls the entire finance, along with the Bank of England, because the Bank of England controls the offshore network, which is also dependent on Bretton Woods, which is also dependent on the dollar, but more specifically the euro dollar, because the euro dollar is a dollar traded outside U.S. borders. And that never used to be allowed until Reagan. You couldn't do that as an individual. You couldn't do that as a corporation unless you were buying goods with the other currency. And so you could take dollars out, buy the goods, and then that's it. You couldn't store them out there. You couldn't put them in an offshore bank. So these are all things that enable the parasite, that enable all these things that I just talked about, and the power of the cartel. Do you see what JP Morgan's stock is today? I think it was $35 5 years ago. Now it's $180. And that's why, because as the stock market goes up, people don't understand when the stock market goes up, your standard of living goes down. It's an inverse relationship. Now, yeah, some people have 401ks. That's different. Sell your soul. That's fine. I hope you feel good about it. But for people that don't participate in that, and for workers in general, even those with 401ks, because they might gain a little in their 401ks, but they're actually the power of their labor, you know, their power as a laborer is going down every time the power of the cartel and capital goes up. It's capital versus labor. It's pretty simple. It's always been that way. It'll always be that way under this capitalist system. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's an irrefutable law under capitalism. When the power of labor goes up, the profits of corporations go down. When the cheap labor comes in, the profits of corporations go up, and banks, and the system, and the cartels. And then they can jack us with food prices, oil prices, insurance prices, healthcare prices, everything they want to, because there's only a few of them, because we haven't regulated, we haven't broken up cartels, we haven't used antitrust laws, which Teddy Roosevelt put on the books, but we never use them. We just keep letting them merge because they control the government. They've captured every branch of the government and the government itself and all the Congress and all the judges and everything. And so, but the BRICS is the answer. The uniting. It's just like, you know, we always used to say back in, you know, I'm an old lefty, labor union, right? Labor movement. And it was always about, you know, unite. So somebody goes on strike, everybody go on strike. Have a general strike. Solidarity, right? Stick together, right? You always have that principle as a labor union. You always had the principle of sticking together. Well, it's the same internationally. You know, at these countries who have been totally screwed over by the dollar system for all these years, and there's over 200 of them, because the only people that benefit is the United States, Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, basically. Everybody else gets screwed. So those countries they have to stick together, and they have to stick together on currency. They have to stick together on labor law. They cannot allow their labor to be sold too cheap, so that they are in competition then with a country down the line that doesn't want to sell its labor that cheap, that wants to have a high standard of living, that wants to have its people doing well. They have to demand a high price for their cocoa, for their bauxite, so there has to be producer cartels like there used to be in the old days, where Australia, Jamaica, they had a bauxite cartel. It's what OPEC started as. OPEC started as an oil cartel. It wasn't a bad cartel. It was a cartel to protect themselves against the four horsemen of oil and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds oil companies. But it turned into a corrupt cartel because the Saudis were corrupted and probably always were corrupt. And they always hijacked OPEC, and they still do, really. They still do. So you always had two factions there: the price hawks, the Iranians, the Iraqis, the Algerians, the Indonesians, the Nigerians who wanted a high price for oil, which they should get. And then you have these GCC countries who would drive the price down for the Western companies. So the idea of a BRICS currency, if you can unite on that, if you can agree to share a currency and to somehow get off of this system, because, I was sitting in a tree in Jamaica with this Rasta. We were smoking a joint. This Italian comes up, real asshole tourist. He starts taking pictures of the guy in the tree, like, oh, let's take a picture of the Rasta. And the guy's like, hey, Italian, can you tell me why one Jamaican dollar, or why 40 Jamaican dollar, $1 American dollar? Can you tell me? And the guy just like glosses over and runs away. Jamaicans are smart people. So why is that? Can anybody tell me? How come it takes 40 Jamaican dollars to get $1 US? How come it takes, 17 Mexican pesos to get $1 US? How come it takes 8 Guatemalan quetzals to get $1 US? How come? Because this is the system of Bretton Woods. And if they don't like your policies, if you spend too much money on your people, on infrastructure, on food aid subsidies for flour and rice and basic things, free electricity, maybe free housing, they hate you. They're going to crash your currency. That's just what they do. If they don't like your policies, they crash your currency. They like your policies, like they love the UK's policies. That's why the British pound is worth more than the US dollar. Did you notice that? Why is that, by the way? Britain has no resources. It's a small island with no resources. So why is the British pound worth 1.3 to the US dollar? It's stronger than the dollar. I wonder. Because the city of London is there. That's why. So it's these basic little simple questions that nobody ever asks. And this is where BRICS can come in. And if they can unite, and if they can just somehow go around this thing, but they're going to need some capital. They're going to need a lot of capital to do this. But I think they can do it because they got resources, right? And if you just convert your resources into capital in your own currency, and you don't give them away to the West in their currency and let them jack you, you can do these things.
That's the secret. But let me ask you this. These creatures, these people, the Crown, the City of London, are not going to give up without a fight.
No.
And a fight for them is usually military might. Do you think it could come to that? Because I have said, I think this is the epic battle for the future order and control of the world. And will those people in London and the Crown, wherever they are, realize they've lost the battle, take us all down in a nuclear Armageddon?
Yeah, I think we're there already. I think that's why you have Ukraine. I think that's why you have the Israel situation. I think we're already there. I think they see the writing on the wall and they're freaking out. I think one of the things that flies under the radar a whole bunch is Xi Jinping in China and what the Chinese have been doing lately. Because, the Chinese went down the capitalist road under Deng Xiaoping. Yeah, they brought in the surveillance society, the digital currency, all these things. But now what's happening? Now Xi is going after the oligarchs in China. He's going after the Jack Lews. He's going after the corruption. He's reverting to communism. He's going back to a more communist way. And nobody talks about this. They don't want to talk about this. The CIA can't even get intelligence out of China anymore. They can't find Chinese agents because every time they hire a Chinese agent, they get put in jail by the Chinese because the Chinese have such a better intelligence operations than we do anymore. And so this is huge because, and this just flies under the radar because nobody wants to talk about communism anymore, right? I mean, everybody thinks communism's dead forever or whatever because that's what they told us. That was the narrative of the 90s. Remember that when we were told communism's dead, capitalism's the only way. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. And so that's already happening. It's already, the war is already broken out because the bankers and the crown know what's going on. They know what's going on behind the scenes. This BRICS topic came up a long time ago. I mean, I was doing debates on Press TV about it 10 years ago, right? And it's maturing now. And so what does the West do? They try to bog the Russians down in a war. What does the West do? They try to drag China into a Taiwanese conflict, out of desperation, because they don't want to do that because they know China's got a lot of hardware, right? And they never did it before. They just said, oh, we have a one China policy and you do whatever you want. But that's changed now. Biden's the first president that's come out and changed that policy to where we're openly supporting Taiwan as an independent state. Why? Because the bankers know their time is running out. And if they don't obliterate some stuff, they're gonna get bricksed. They're gonna get bricksed. And their Bretton Woods system is gonna come apart. And so I think the answer I would say is we're already there. The war has already begun because, they're not going to let it happen easy. They're not letting it happen easy. That's why we have all this genocide and murder right now and prolonged wars that don't have to happen because they're hoping against hope that they'll suck enough resources out of Russia and Ukraine to weaken it. And what's happening? Just the opposite. Like I said, just the opposite. The sanctions are weakening the West. And that's how stupid they are. See, they're not omnipotent. They're not stupid. They can be defeated. But again, it's going to take an outside bunch of countries, not just one country, to do it. And now you have Indonesia on board with the BRICS. That's a huge country, fourth most populous country in the world. You have India on board, obviously. South Africa, which is, taking the Israelis to criminal court now over genocide in Gaza. Brazil. I mean, these are huge countries. Of course, China, Russia. I believe it's Ethiopia now. A lot of African nations are wising up. Most African nations are going to go that way. Most nations are going to go that way in the end because they've been screwed. They know it. I mean, the gig's up. It's like you can only exploit people for so long before they just have had enough. And they're willing to do just about anything. And they're willing to take risks. They're willing to take chances. And this is kind of the irony and the paradox of the whole thing. Like the people in the empire, like the Americans now, they take less risks than I've ever seen in my life. I mean, they're the most cowardly, timid, conservative acting people I've ever seen. And I'm including Americans 10 years ago. I've never seen Americans this just like, they're just in a straitjacket. They don't know what to do. Everything's hard. Everything's, And meanwhile, in the third world, I just feel like it's like, you know what? We don't care anymore. Let's go. Let's go do this. Let's go do this. We're done with you. And people here are just more and more like minions and more like they just want to like attack the dissidents like me and you. And they're just horrible kind of in a way. Most Americans are just horrible right now. It's horrible. But that's not the case everywhere. And I'm not going to end up here. I'm not going to die here. I've told you why I'm still here. It's my cat. But I can see the writing on the wall. I know what's coming. And when the time comes, I'll get him out of here. If I have to vaccinate him, that's the only reason. I got to vaccinate him on an airplane. I don't want to do that. And it makes it hard to go anywhere. But look, man, if it comes to where I see it imminent, I'm out of here. And he'll have to suck it up and he'll be fine. But I'm not going to end up here. This place is getting miserable. I mean, everything about it's miserable. The Civil War aspect, the rude people aspect, the timid, scared, obedient people. It's just horrible. You're so glad you got out of here, dude. You got out of here at the right time. And I know a lot of smart people getting out of here. Kevin Barrett got out of here. He's in Morocco. A lot of people are on the move. A lot of smart people got out of here. And yeah, that's why. Because I think in the end, we're going to see justice served. And so after all that, dark stuff we just talked about, that's the good news. I think they will be defeated. And but yeah, I don't think America's going to fare good at all, or American citizens.